It is at my time is Mountain Standard Time. I know that that's not everybody's, but it's at the 1 o'clock hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our early accessible education material echo session. We're really glad you're here. We're hoping to build this network to just ensure that every young child, including infants and toddlers with disabilities, can access and participate meaningful in early learning. So thank you so much for joining us. Um, if you've not taken a minute, put your name and contact information into chat. It just gets us connected over this virtual world. As you noticed, we are recording today's session. Those recordings are stored on iEcho, as well as all of the materials. So by participating in today's session, you're consenting to being recorded. Um, for anybody who's new to this AEM Echo, it's really, like I said, kind of focusing on our youngest learners to access the materials and tools, supports, and services that they need to participate meaningful in everyday routines and early learning activities. If you've joined, you kind of know that we're having these ongoing conversations about what does AEM mean in Part C, early intervention, and how do we help support the families as well as our sectors or agencies that we work with. So we will always have a subject matter expert. Today, we're really lucky to have Kaydee and Michele from the Parent Center perspective, teaching us and sharing with us ways to support families and how to advocate for them. We then also have a case presentation or where we talk about topics that we all kind of are struggling with or trying to navigate around this. And so we move into small breakout groups where we discuss either the problem of practice or those questions to come up with resources. There's so many amazing people on this call that have different ideas and perspectives, and that's how we learn from each other. That builds that professional networking. We love being interactive. So if you have any questions, put them in chat, raise your hand, but be interactive with us. Everybody on this call brings different perspectives and thoughts and ideas, or how does it work in your area versus how does it work in my area. So learning from each other is a great way to just continue to be interactive and support that networking. If you will, take a minute to rename your profile. Again, it just is a great way to know when something is shared. How do I reach out to you again to get some more information? If you have any questions about that, you can ask one of our amazing hub members. They all have an asterisk in front of their name, or they will now, since I just reminded them. That is just an easier way to find them in chat so that you can ask any questions around that. Here's just an example of how to raise your hand or how to do a reaction feature over Zoom. It seems like we've been on Zoom for the new normal now, so probably all of us know how to do that. But in case you need a refresher course, we also talk about sensitive topics. So just a quick reminder to protect that individual privacy. De-identify, again, if you have any questions or unsure, reach out to myself or a hub member and we'll get you those answers. Just some quick session etiquette. Please remember to respect the presenter. So use the chat feature or raise your hand to ask those questions. We love to see smiling faces on the call instead of black screens. So if you're comfortable, we would encourage you to turn on that camera. It really just, again, helps us connect and build this community and making network more meaningful. Um, we also know that we have a lot of people from different states and agencies and organizations. So when you're talking, please take a minute and introduce yourself so we, again, can just learn from each other and get to know each other over this virtual call. We will be dropping and after the end of the session in the follow-up email, sending out a survey link. The survey link, when you complete that, there is an option to do a certificate. So that is how you get that certificate for professional development, is by completing that survey. Thank you to everybody who completes that survey. It is what we take back to share with how this project is working and what are we doing to support all of you guys as you're out there doing the work for AEM. We are always interested in hearing how or what cases that you guys have. So if you're interested in submitting a case to hear information or resources, please consider submitting a case or questions that you guys have as you're joining these echo sessions. We'd love to talk about it as this large group. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to Kaydee and Michele, who will be our expert presenters today.
Thank you, Janelle. I don't know about experts, but I am glad to be here with you guys today to talk about something that is passionate to me, supporting parents. My name is Kaydee McMahon. I'm with the Utah Parent Center, and I am a parent, first of all, right? I've been through this process. I had a child go through early intervention. She's now 13. Crazy. Um, but then I also, kind of a little bit of back history on me. I was also an early childhood special education preschool teacher for 6 years before I became a mom. So I have a little bit of an idea of both sides of it. And today I hope to give you some information on how to support the parents you're working with gain access to AEM and AT as they need it and to advocate for themselves. And I do have Michele Tyler here as my support. Michele, I'm going to let you introduce yourself for a sec too.
Thanks. So, hi everyone. Michele Tyler with the SIPR, the Center for Parent Information and Resources. And yes, of course, I'm a parent first as well. And it is a big passion of mine. A lot of people, you get into this work because of our kids. And some of us don't even come in with not only the knowledge of special education, but the backbone or the gumption to advocate and to push. But this world makes you part of that. And, helping parents find that voice is something that I'm passionate about as well. So, I'm looking forward to being able to share this information with all of you about how to be able to help parents advocate.
Okay. I love this picture. Are you guys ready? This is actually going to be a fun presentation. I know Michele and I are excited about it. But these are the topics we want to go over today. Um, so first is understanding AEM and AT. I feel like we could do that every session in this echo because it is so complex to understand in the view of infant toddler. So I'm going to share with you kind of my opinion on that. We're going to talk about advocacy language and giving parents the language they need to advocate. And part of that is going to help them understand their rights. So we will dive into that a little bit as well. Good communication resources or good communication practices, and then resources and supports to help both you and the parents and families that you support. So first, let's talk about AT and AEM. The first thing I'm going to give you as a tip for parents is this is alphabet soup for us, and it is an alphabet soup that we are not familiar with. So the first thing is define. Give us those acronyms, tell us what they mean, and why they're important. And so for here, let's start with assistive technology. It's anything low tech, high tech that a student uses to help augment their communication or accessing their environment. It can be for a myriad of different things, but it helps them accomplish a goal. And then AEM, accessible, sorry, educational materials. Honestly, these two together to me are just one thing. It's about access. Access to tools and materials to meet a student's needs, whether those be a physical need or an educational need, which at birth to to toddler, right, are very intertwined. Um, so access, where can we access AEM and AT? I think the biggest one is through accommodations. Um, I put on here eye level. How often do our infants and toddlers experience world from the world from this looking up view, right? Everything's big, everything's above, everything's out of their reach. So anytime we bring an experience to eye level and allow them independent access to explore, that's accessible educational materials, right? That's bringing things to the infant and toddler to learn. Sometimes we need to modify those materials, right? If we have a vision impairment, we want to maybe make it larger so that they can see it. Or if we have different sensory needs, do we give it a different sensory input? Do we look at beyond just auditory and visual processing, but are looking at touch and smell? To experience their whole world. And then obviously assistive technology would fit into any of those accommodations, correct? Um, and then where can we find these? There's programs and supports that provide these to families. Early intervention. You guys are our forefront. You are the ones that bring these to us for the first time in our lives. And they're tied to our IFSPs and the goals and the ambitions that we have as parents for our children. We can also gain these in early Head Start centers. A little plug for parent centers, Michelle and I, we can also help parents find these. And then there's also local community opportunities. Here in Utah, we have some great programs. We have a nonprofit called Help Me Grow, which is all about helping parents of children birth to age 8 understanding milestones, and they can get one-on-one support. Another awesome local opportunity we have here in Utah is Care About Childcare, which is through the workforce services. And if a child's needs aren't met, right? If a parent is trying to find care for their child, are they going to have the time to advocate and look for and access educational materials? Not really. We've got to get the whole child centered and supported. And then some community environments where we can find access. We need it at home, we need it at daycare, the library, church, basically anywhere in the community, including the playground. And experiences. This is one that I want to push out as a big, kind of out of the box, accessible educational material. Going to the aquarium, going to the zoo, the museums, farms, gaining those real life experiences because that's what our infants to toddlers are learning. They're learning what life is, what the world is around them, and how they interact with the world around them. And so I think experience, and again, making that experience accessible to the infant and toddler. So now let's talk about some advocacy language. Helping parents ask, what's next? What if X doesn't work? What is plan B? How often are we going to check in? How do I know if we're on track? At first, you model these and help parents ask you by asking them yourselves. But then you can also prompt to get parents to ask these questions as well. What does it look like? So I'm sorry, I picked this picture because I love that. Sometimes that's how I feel. Like I sit through an IFSP meeting and at the end I'm like, I don't, that all sounded really great. I don't know what that means. So are we encouraging parents to ask things like, what does it look like? And what is the best way to do XYZ so that they understand what you mean? And I like to think of this in another way. A parent tells a child to go clean their room, right? The parent's expectation is that the bed's made, there's nothing on the floor, and it's even vacuumed, right? That's if we're going for a, gold star. Now, maybe the child's view is, hey, a clean room means there's nothing on my bed. So they throw it all onto the floor, right? We're both using the same language. We're both saying, clean your room, or I've cleaned my room, but we don't have the same outcome, right? So we want to make sure that we're seeing parents at the level that they're seeing things and that we're on the same page. Link the need to the outcome. How does the AEM or the AET tool link to the family goal? How does it support the desired outcome? A prompt you can use is, my child needs this tool because it allows them to do this action, which directly impacts and helps them achieve our family goal to do XYZ, right? Giving parents that language to say, I need this because of this. So I want to share an example. This is a made up example, but let's say we have Sam, who is our toddler, and it's snack time. Um, and the parent's goal is that we want him to tell us what he wants for snack instead of crying. And so the AT or the AEM that we as a team propose to use is a low-tech communication board with large real pictures of his favorite snacks. So Sam cries during snack time because he cannot express his choices. And because of his low vision, standard icons are too small or too blurry for him to see. And he also doesn't quite understand that a symbol means a real object. So if we use a large, high contrast actual photograph of his snacks, then Sam will be able to see the images and recognize his real food. And this AT and AEM directly support the outcome of reducing his crying and learning to express his wants. The next thing we can help parents do is prompt them to ask open-ended questions, model questions that are open-ended. You can say things like, I want to make sure I'm explaining this clearly. What parts of that felt like confusing or like alphabet soup? I know I just threw a lot of data at you. What can I clarify before we move on? Or I want to make sure we're on the same page. What thoughts do you have about this goal or this outcome? And when you check for parent understanding, be respectful, and courteous in that, but also let them know, I want to know. I want to know where you're concerned. I want to know where you're confused. Okay. Next is help parents find a positive outlook and to focus on the child's strength. Let's look back at Sam, for example. Maybe before he starts to cry at snack time, we see a precursor behavior of pushing the offered food away before he cries. So this is Sam using his skill to say no. Do we as a team recognize this and build on it by saying something like, Sam, thank you for telling me no. I understand you don't want this snack. And then direct him to his board and say, tell me what you would like. So it builds on his strength, which is saying no, and it helps to shape and expand it into communicating his wants. Do we celebrate that no? Do we celebrate that skill? And then build on it and help parents see that positive outlook. And so I love this picture of the kids. They got all the pots and pans out, right? And they're on the floor. What's the positive of this? I've got to clean this up. This is good interactive play. We're going to get some good sounds and some, maybe we could learn beats or rhythms, right? It's a great opportunity. So don't always have the negative things, the things the child's that we view as wrong or needs fixed or needs helped. Maybe it's got some steps before it that are actually quite helpful. Um, Another way to help parents gain advocacy language is to share your draft IFSPs. Now, kind of giving them the IFSP as homework before you're ready to come back and go over it as a team allows them to read through the information at home in an environment where they don't feel pressure. And even if they don't understand the language in it, they then know what to ask at the meeting to get clarification on so that they can then learn those terms. And it's also gives them time to think about what they want to add. That's always the thing that as a parent at first was hard for me. We'd sit in at these meetings. I didn't really know what to expect from the meeting and then be asked, now what do you want to do? Do you want to do one of these fancy goals with all this criteria and all this stuff in it? And I'm like, I don't have a goal like that written out. But if I have time to review it and look at it, then I can say, oh, hey, you know what? I am worried about XYZ. I would like to address it. How can we address it in the IFSP? So just letting them have this preparation as parents, it turns the meeting from a stressful on the spot situation to a more collaborative conversation.
Katie, if I could just jump in for a
Yes.
second and just say, so for that last slide, the importance of that draft IFSP is paramount. And not only for the parent, but for the family. Siblings know their sibling with special needs much better than the parent does most of the time. Like we always say, parents, we know everything, right? But siblings really know getting people involved in that process. It's great for that moment and for the longevity because when there's other meetings and they're there to help the child with special needs to have or that needs that AT or AM to have that voice and to be part of the process. So it's real important to start that as something that the parent expects, so that when they go to an IEP meeting, they expect to have that as part of the process, and that it's so valuable in the process for making sure the family and the whole child is looked at, not just one person's view. I
Yes.
love that slide too, and that point, Katie, thank you.
Thank you, 100%. And that's why I did the messy slide, right? Our drafts aren't always perfect. It's okay if there's spaghetti all over the face. We'll get it cleaned up, and that's okay. The next thing is to explain parents' rights in a very understandable summary. Now, I say that with some high expectation, right? Because some of that is pretty hard. So I want to dive into explaining parents' rights a little more, because I feel like this is super important. Um, Parents are able to better advocate when they understand their rights. Essentially, understanding their rights helps parents know what they can and can't ask for, and also as well to know what to expect. And so these are the six main rights in Part C of IDEA. And I want to go through each one of them pretty quickly because I feel like you guys might be familiar with these. But how can we share this with the parent in a way that's understandable? Usually, what we do is we show up at the IFSP. We have I know our state has a summary of what those rights are in a bulleted info sheet, which is super great, super helpful. But we hand that to parents or we read that bullet point word for word and then we move on, right? We've missed a big teaching opportunity. And so let's dive into this a little bit. So, informed parental consent. Parents can approve or decline each service individually, meaning saying no to one service, such as as AEM or AT, is not the same as saying no to all services. So parents might be saying yes to what you're proposing because they may be afraid that if they say no, they don't get the other stuff, like the speech and language and the other things like that. We want to make them understand that this can be tailored to their needs. Parents can say no to services previously accepted. So if they feel like something that was happening in the past is not effective anymore or doesn't fit their family dynamic right now, they can reject that without losing their other services. Parents can withdraw consent at any time. So again, if something isn't working, we don't have to keep going. We can stop. And then informed consent is required before any service begins. So parents have that, I don't know, it's kind of just a comfort of you're not going to start running with something without me being on board. That we do this together. I'm going to sign a paper before we move on. Next is prior written notice. So again, we have to have parents sign anytime we choose to start, change, or stop as a team any service. And so we want to make sure that parents know, okay, that's what this is. And it's nice as a parent to have this written down because then I can go back to it if I didn't quite understand it or review it at a different time. The next right is a coordinated IFSP. Parents are part of the creation and updates, and they have a say on what AEM or AT they want or will be used as the team. They're involved in planning and participating in the IFSP meetings. So again, sending that draft, letting them have some data to share before the meeting itself to finalize it. And that's also a great time. IFSP meetings are a great time for that clarity of what the AEM is and the AT and what it looks like. Parents can invite others to the IFSP. So if we have a sibling who maybe knows things, maybe we want to get their input for the meeting, whether they attend or they share that input in a different way. Or we have other caregivers who take care of the child, who would be also using the AEM and AT in that child's daily routine. We would want them to come and know what's happening too. And then that way, as a parent, you don't also feel overwhelmed. Like, oh, I have this kind of complicated, because sometimes they can be, right? Some of the AT and AEM we give can be a little bit complicated. And as a parent on your own, that might feel overwhelming. But if I have somebody else that I can bring to a meeting, a family member, a friend, a neighbor who can support me in that, I don't feel as alone. And then every 6 months, it has to be reviewed. So again, I feel like this is reiterated multiple times within parents' rights, is what's said now isn't set in stone for forever. And we have a chance to review and update and change. The next right is the right to have these services in what's called the natural environment. So services happen where the child spends their time. And does our AEM and our AT fit that? Does it fit when they're at daycare? Does it fit when they're in the community? Does it fit when they're at home? And services are built into family routines. So again, does the AEM or the AT fit in that routine? Or how do we mitigate it so it doesn't disrupt family routine to a point that it's not helpful or usable? And then if services need to be provided anywhere else, such as like a clinical setting, the parents are explained that in writing. So sometimes there are those needs for a clinical or hospital setting. The next right is that parents have a right to review records. The part I love about this is not only do they have a right to see and request the IFSP, any evaluation reports, progress data, prior written notices, any of that, that it also comes with an understanding. So part of their right is to understand what the records say. And so we can encourage parents to say, "Hey, I know you requested this data. Let me know. Let's go through it. If you have questions, let me review it with you. I want to make sure you understand. Or go home and look at it and come back and let's review it together." We want to make sure that parents know that they have a right to ask to understand. Sometimes you just feel like you're so overwhelmed and you don't know what to say, and you guys are the professionals, so I leave it to you. Does that make sense? Um, Next, the last right is to resolve disagreements. So when parents know the process and options, they can make more informed decisions. It's also important to know that there are tools available when teams disagree. Sometimes parents might just agree with a team because they're afraid if they don't agree, right, we're going to lose everything else, or we're not going to make any progress, or it's kind of going to dismantle the team. But really, there are tools. If we're not seeing eye to eye, and then again, another plug for the Utah Parent Center, we can help bridge that gap. Um, or you also have options to things such as mediation, state complaint, and due process, and letting the parents know that these are tools. They're not consequences or punishments. They're tools to help parents to know what they can do. Um, Michele, I want to throw it back to you. Any other thoughts on why it's so important for parents to understand their rights?
So I'm glad you did that. So this last one, I will say for the when you're trying to resolve a disagreement, it's a very emotional time for parents during this. You know, these are our kids. This is our future. This is our babies. So, plug to the parent centers and to any EI person who's there that can kind of help the parent realize that even though you don't agree, it's how you don't agree that makes a difference. It's how you advocate that makes a difference. And yes, you have these state processes, and you can go formally do mediation and all that. But sometimes just a good conversation, and going back to the other slide, understanding everything that's happening on both sides. Maybe the parent doesn't want to explain why this doesn't work in the home because culturally, whatever's going on, and we don't want this particular assistive technology. Well, if it's explained and there's a conversation about it, then there can be a better resolution. So, those conversations really make a huge difference. And just other professionals knowing that or understanding that these kids are our future. And we know you do this work because you love children as well, but it's a very emotional time, and there's other pullback from other people maybe in your lives. Maybe someone else in the child's life doesn't feel as though this process should be going on. There's a lot of things that could be happening. So to be able to understand that and make sure that everyone's on the same page and have a good discussion is so important.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. And communication, you hit right onto what I wanted to talk to next because they feed into each other, right? Collaborative communication is going to get you the furthest when you work together as an IFSP team. So I want to talk about a couple of just techniques and tools and reminders. I feel like a lot of you already know all this stuff. It's just reminding you in your day-to-day with parents, use these tips. Remember these things to help you through. And so one thing that you have that's unique to early intervention is that you have the role of both the professional and a mentor. Like I said earlier, you are the parent's first responder to the special education world and what they're going to be experiencing. Um, some children will exit out of early intervention and not need as much support. Wonderful, great. Others, this might be a long haul situation, and you're that first step, you're that first person. So not only are you the professional to help their child, But you are also kind of forced into the role of mentor to walk them through this process, to let them understand these systems. Um, and so here's some tips to help you through that. Um, as professionals, you spend years getting your degree in your respective fields. Parents are earning their degree in knowing and understanding their child. And what we want is a good blend of both of those. Your experience, your expertise, your study that you have put in, but then the parents' understanding of the child and their family and their culture and how those two can merge together. Um, and next is to model, be an example of advocacy. Use words like I gave you in the slides before, ideas, techniques to use to model, to help them and to help them advocate for their team. And the big thing here too is that we use we language. Now, I will say as a parent, there's two we's in an IFSP meeting. There's we all together, and then there's the we that's the professional we. And we want to make sure that we don't differentiate those two we's, that we bring them together, that there isn't a we as the early intervention program and you, the parent. It's all of us together. And so beware of that because it is a thing. There are two we's. And then respect. Understand that advocacy is one of the many competing priorities that parents have. And focus on adjusting steps forward that match the parent's capacity. So at times you might have to be more of the parent's advocate and the child's advocate than at other times when the parents are in a better space. Then you can be more of a coach and a mentor to help them advocate. But there are going to be times, right, where they're just going to need more supports. And so, again, another plug for the Utah Parent Center or parent centers, I should say, we can help you with that. We can step in and we can help the parent learn those advocacy skills as well, so you're not alone. So conversations, when we have conversations with parents, just some things to remember. Boundaries, rather than demands or ultimatums, what does the team not want to compromise on? This was a huge aha moment for me as a parent when I was disagreeing with my team. It wasn't that I was disagreeing with the outcome we were all looking for. I was disagreeing with the method. But if we all have the same outcome, then it's easier to bring the focus back on that, and then say, okay, if this doesn't work and your idea doesn't work, let's think out of the box what's another way. So remember that boundaries are okay and that we want to have boundaries and say, as a team, as a parent, these are things we just don't want to compromise on. And it's the outcomes, not necessarily the method. Um, and then check to see if boundaries have been violated or ask for clarification on what boundaries are. What are the parents' stance? Um, and listen, this is one that I think gets told and overtold, and everybody hears again and again. But when you're listening to a parent, be active. Say things like, I see, or got you, uh-huh, yeah. Help them know you're listening. Use summary statements to make sure that you understand. If I understand correctly, you mean, or what I'm hearing is. We want to hear that multiple times in conversations with parents. And then also use verbal cues. There's times when we're at an IFSP meeting, and especially the data part, guys, when we're talking about the present levels, that can get very bogged down for parents. And so it's good to have verbal cues to say something like, well, now we're going to talk about, so that the parent can shift gears of, okay, we're moving past this onto something else. Or help them tune into a part that say this next part is important because. So those verbal cues are also very helpful. Avoid overload. Keep your explanations free of too many technical terms. If you do need to use technical terms, again, define them and help them understand why they're important. And then check to see if the parent's feeling overwhelmed. Oftentimes, now this isn't true with every parent, but oftentimes a parent will go quiet and just start nodding your head. That's the time to check in and make sure that they're understanding that they're okay or if they need a break. Frequency, again, keep communication frequent. It helps to build trust. And it can be very different ways. Emails, notebooks, quick calls, a text, whatever works, just keep it going. Have some of it be scheduled and anticipated, and others don't, they don't all have to be. And then be open to different perspectives. And I know Michelle touched on this, but there's different cultural, linguistic, or experiential backgrounds of these families, and we want to be considerate of that. Listen with empathy and with curiosity rather than defensiveness, and that will help bridge and help you guys find a lot of creative solutions. And then this is my favorite, celebrate. Celebrate the achievements no matter how small. And I feel like early intervention programs are the best at this because we know those small milestones mean so, so much. So celebrate those with parents and keep that in their minds as you move forward. So now I want to provide you with resources to help you as professionals as well as the parents. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, I've given a few plugs for the Center for Parent and Information and Resources. So SIPR, that's where Michelle's at, that's the national hub. They're over all the parent centers, but they're federally mandated to be in each state. So there is a parent center in your state. Might not have the same name, but your state has one. And you can have your parents call in, or you as a professional can call in with questions. And our model is that, like we said at the beginning, we're parents. We've been through this, and we that helps us connect with the parents. It's parent peer-to-peer support is the model. Other things that we've talked about is we want to look at the whole child, right? So if the family needs financial support or caregiver support, there should be resources in your state to help them obtain waivers or get on the SSDI, Social Security Disability Income. Again, parent centers can connect you with that as well. And then you want to connect your parents with local community, their support groups or nonprofits or healthcare opportunities within your area. And if you don't have these resources, that's okay. Call your parent center. This is my favorite page on the SIPR webpage because this shows, and I'm going to have Michelle drop this link in the chat for you. You can go to this interactive map, click on your state, and find the parent center for you that you can connect your parents to. And really, the big point I want to get across with this presentation today is that we are all a team. And I feel like we hear that a lot. IFSP, that's your team. But you as a professional also need support, and a parent also needs support in addition to that. And that's where the parent centers come in and can help. And we can help you find the resources you need to share with families, or parents can reach out to us directly and we can get them the resources that they're looking for as well and help you because sometimes it's a lot, right? We talked about the parent capacity, and sometimes you have to advocate more for them, and then other times you're more mentor. Well, the same's going to happen for you. Sometimes you're going to need more help and support because you're on burnout. And so, as parent centers, we're here to help you as well. And then, Michelle, I wanted to see if you had any other thoughts to
I do
share.
want to go back to one thing. The communication part, I think, was so key to a lot of this discussion. And the professionals have an opportunity to really say and do what may seem like a little thing to really encourage that parent to be a bigger and better advocate for their child. And also sometimes even the opposite. I personally would shut down when I was just called mom in the room. Like everyone else had a name or a title. And they just, and mom is a title, don't get me wrong, but we're in a professional setting, and that was diminishing to me and other parents. To be in a meeting where everyone has their coffees from the coffee cooler, and no one offered me anything. Like we're on the same level, we're together, we're a team. So like you said, Katie, people throw around the word team, but I think that making these meetings, the communication during the meeting, showing that we're a team, and just the little things, like even sitting in the little chair as everyone else sits in the bigger chair sometimes when your kid's younger, that sort of stuff happens. So it's just, you guys have such a great opportunity to be that first responder to that parent and really help them understand. And we are very grateful for that. And, it's great when that goes really well to really help parents. Thank you.
Hey, and so I just have here the information. So those of you who are from Utah, here's how you can reach the Utah Parent Center. And I guess any questions? I wanted to leave a little time for questions, and then I know we have our case study. That's the exciting part of these echoes. So any questions or thoughts before we hand it back to Janelle?
I'm going to open it up to any discussions that anybody has. You can either put them in chat or come off mute.
Well,
Cynthia.
this is Cynthia. Thank you so much, Katie and Michelle, for that really, really helpful perspective on I really appreciate your focus on the collaboration and the partnership between the professionals who are supporting the family and then the families who are receiving the services, and just how when it comes to Part C and early intervention, how intricate how different that is, how unique that is from really any other service that's out there. So thank you for really stressing and emphasizing so clearly with those examples as well. You know, Michelle, when you were talking about being called mom at an IEP meeting, when I was a science teacher for years, and was often the general education teacher at the IEP meeting. And there was one district that I worked in, and this was before I had children myself, but the special education director would refer to the parent, and it was always a mother. Honestly, my 5 years of teaching science, I don't recall seeing a dad. Not that they weren't there, the IEPT meetings. The mother was typically the representative, and um, the special ed director would always refer to the parent as mom. It was always, well, mom, mom, well, mom here says.
It's
And
almost the equivalent to honey during like an
Mhm.
executive meeting. Like, honey, like, come on now. I have a name. Yes.
And of course, like I said, it was before I was a mother myself, but I definitely, just being in being in the meeting and in that context. Of course, I was a relatively young teacher and didn't have any authority in those situations, but it has stayed with me all this time. So I found that so intriguing that you brought that up as an example, because I think it's right. It's I think we can always assume good intention in these situations, but good intention that doesn't necessarily translate into respect and what is actually being received on the other side. So thank you for those vivid examples and cautions.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in IEP meetings, or just as you guys were telling that story, it happens in doctor's offices all the time when you're at pediatrician visits. They just call you mom, and like that they don't even know your name. Austin, your comment in chat for sure. So appreciate that. Other comments or questions that anybody has for Katie and Michelle?
As a person who's participated in many, many IFSP meetings during my career, I always am a little embarrassed about, Oregon has like a 30 or 40-page parent rights document that we are, required to hand in every meeting. And I always love conversations with parents about what they do with all those pieces of paper. But I was particularly struck by what you said about spending some time to make sure that parents understood those rights. For me, that was a very valuable section, even though I have participated in a gazillion IFSP meetings, just to explain what those things mean. And some of the ones, the six that you listed, to me are things that I'm not sure, like reviewing records, and some of the other ones. So thank you for that. I was really struck by, I needed to know that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I really appreciated you taking the time to do that, because we all think we know parent rights, but it's that understanding of parent rights too. It's not just handing them their rights, it's actually diving into it and what does that mean for you. So that was a great perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think we we do explain it to new parents, but what I got out of that was, it's probably worth spending the time every time to just go over it a little bit.
Yeah.
because we forget, or we forget the part that's not working well.
Or as we all need to be reminded, so do parents need to be reminded of things too,
Yeah.
right? We kind of get on autopilot and having that reminder. So taking that time every time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you, most of the calls that I have when parents call in asking about stuff, I'll say, well, you have this right. And they're like, I didn't know that. I'm like that. And it's like, well, have you gotten copies of your procedural safeguards? Yeah, I've gotten that. But are we looking at it? Are we really going through it in plain language? Because it's so legalese, right? And that it's so hard to understand that even we don't love going over it as professionals. But it makes a big difference when a parent is like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense now.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you everyone for listening and letting me get on my soapbox. This is something I am very passionate about. And so I'm thankful that you all were here to listen and hopefully can take something away from it, and appreciate your time.
Okay. So our case was, sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. I will do that as soon as I'm done. Our case was shared today by another hub member, and I'm going to drop it in chat because we don't have slides. And if you're a visual learner like me, having that in front of you is helpful to have. So I am going to just read it because she is not here today. So we have Julianne. Juliana, she's 22 months right now. She is 19.5 months adjusted. She was born at 30 weeks gestation and spent 3 months in the NICU. She lives with her parents, Margaret and Dave, and her 4-year-old brother and 6-year-old sister. So she has been diagnosed with cerebral palsy and has high muscle tone throughout her body. This impacts caregiving activities like feeding and dressing, as well as interactions with her environment. She does receive early intervention services at home and also attends OT and PT so just because Katie reminded me about acronyms, occupational therapy and physical therapy at the Children's Hospital through private insurance. She participates in her family's religious services, sibling sporting events and activities, community activities, and visits to friends and relatives. Other than one babysitter, she's rarely cared for by anyone other than her parents. So some of her strengths that she has is that she's really active socially and interactive. She makes eye contact. She follows activities in the room, responds to social interactions with facial expressions, laughter, and vocalizations. Affectionate, enjoys being held, bounced, all those fun things we do with kids. She does roll front to back and back to front, and she can sit with moderate support. So in a small chair or with an adult behind her to prevent falls. She graduated from an NG tube and eats solid soft foods by mouth, drinks from a bottle, which she attempts to hold. She's showing understanding by physical and emotional responses, like looking excited when told she's going to the park, indicates yes by questioning, to questions by vocalizing and smiling, and no by shaking her head. She waves to show greetings. She has a few consistent word approximations that are understood by her family. I don't know if any of you are like me. I'm now picturing a kid that I have on my caseload and wondering how I can support them. And that's one of the things I love about case presentations is that while we don't know this Juliana particular, we all have a case similar to this that we probably are starting to picture. So Some of the challenges that she has within routines is that there's some playtime, so she needs full support during playtime because of her limited physical activities or physical ability to explore and interact within the environment. She's not able to move around once placed in a setting. She can activate simple cause and effect toys, but has limited ability to grasp and manipulate objects. So her meals also need full assistance. So she's not able to feed herself finger foods or with a spoon. She has outgrown the infant high chair, but isn't secure in the seat her siblings used at that age. So she's usually fed in a parent's lap, which can make mealtime difficult. She sometimes refuses foods, but she can express what she wants or if she's full. Communication in all settings is that she doesn't have a consistent way to express needs, thoughts, requests, and she's beginning to show frustration when she wants to do something but can't tell us what it is. Understanding appears to be rapidly surpassing her expressive abilities. So the family's priorities are that Dan and Margaret are eager to involve Juliana in all aspects of their busy family life. They're concerned about her being left out and getting frustrated. Now that many of the medical challenges of her infancy have seemed to stabilize, they're trying to understand the nature and extent of her ongoing needs. Margaret has expressed that it is sometimes difficult to do things that she needs to do at home and support the older children while also keeping Juliana engaged in those activities as opposed to sitting passively by herself. They are very active and outdoor oriented family and wonder what that will look like for this child who may have limited mobility. They sent their older children to a forest preschool where most of the day is spent outdoors and would like Juliana to attend the same school when she's older. They are committed to low tech, low screen parenting style. They don't have a TV in living area in their home and rarely allow their children to use tablets or other devices, preferring them to play with books, art supplies, pretend play items, etc. And the team's focus is as they support the family in developing strategies for Juliana to be more independent in a variety of settings. Some of the team members, especially Part C, SLP, and Private OT, have suggested using an iPad or other device for games, interactive books, and possible communication. Going to that family preference or culture or response that might lead to some discussions since family is really committed to that low tech, low screen parenting style. So in our breakout groups, we'd love to have some discussions around what are some options the team might explore to help Juliana engage more actively in her environment. What kind of environmental adaptations, adaptive books or tools, etc., would you consider? And then when the team mentioned an iPad with interactive books and games to parents, they expressed reluctance to use screen time. How do we proceed as a team with that? The speech language pathologist is concerned that Juliana's expressive speech may be slow to develop or be very unclear. And how might she approach this with family? And what options and supports could they explore? And then the final one is, although Juliana is young. It's not too early to start thinking about next steps. So how can the team support the family in considering options for more community involvement, social and peer interactions? What would be the consideration for Juliana to attend the nature preschool that her siblings went to? And how can the team support the family in exploring options and advocating for Juliana and their own preferences and priorities? So we are going to move into breakout groups and just have those discussions around it. Please take a minute to do some introductions so we all learn who each other is to continue to build that networking. And hopefully everybody, all the hub members got a copy, and everybody on the call were able to download that case so you can see that in your breakout rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and open those right now. Well, go ahead. Why don't you share whatever you were going to share with us? That's what we're going to spend the last little bit just kind of recapping each breakout group.
Okay, I could do that. Anybody from group one, feel free to check in. We talked about the questions, we talked about the case, we talked about what we, from the write-up at least, thought were perhaps the child's needs, the needs of the family. We added in needs to pull in siblings into the child's whatever's chosen for the child. We talked a lot about communication needs being a primary need here, because they're saying that she is acquiring language but not able to communicate, and it sounds like that's a source of frustration. We talked about different low-tech ways that we could introduce some vocabulary and situational use of low-tech, so that there's success communicating in different settings where there may not now be success. And then someone had a great idea to also, if the parents really want to stick with low tech right now, maybe just start to introduce as the child progresses, these things are working, but this would be a next step, or this is something that's available on the next level to meet your child's needs. We talked about an iPad with communication apps. We talked about possibly other low-level tech.
Yeah, those
rather
are
than just complete low tech.
wow,
I think
great.
that was most of what we talked about.
That's awesome. I also loved your point that you were just talking about is starting to talk to parents long term. Like, what might this look like long term for them? And I think as a hub team, that's one of the discussions we've been having a lot amongst us, is saying, maybe in early intervention, educational materials aren't always something that we talk about because we think about that in a curriculum. But what would that look like long term for those families, and how do we start those discussions? So I'm glad your group discussed that. And thank you, Karen, for sharing those out.
That's a shout out to Austin. That was her idea.
Oh, nice, Austin. Very good. And thank you again for sharing those out. All right. So in the other group, Alex, that was your group. I don't know who might share those out.
Does anyone from my group want to share out? I know Katie was just saying she feels like she hasn't talked at all this session. I'm just kidding. Anybody?
Guess that means it's you, Alex. Nobody's jumping at the bits too.
That's okay. Okay, so for the first question, it was really nice to be sort of fresh off of Katie's presentation about thinking about parent needs. So we had sort of said that we have, a lot of questions for the parents. First, like, what's the hardest part of your day? What are your goals? What are the things you want to focus on? But some things that really jumped out to us was we all agreed that positioning is going to be a really important first step. because it's sort of opened the door to all other sorts of learning. We had talked about how, sitting on your parents' lap while you're eating is really uncomfortable for everybody. That seems like a sort of logical first tackling of things to maybe address. And then we also, Katie had mentioned, bringing things to her levels that she can interact, right? So how are we bringing play to a place where she can access it? How are we bringing, peers, siblings, parents, shared attention down to a place where she is able to access those things while we're sort of working on that positioning, whether we're figuring out, does she need a different chair? Does she need a stander? What does she need? And again, thinking about the parents' goals and what they really want to address sort of first and foremost. So that was our question 1. Should I continue on?
We have maybe time for one more. Before you move on, I just want to really add that positioning, I think that's a critical thing. And it's not just going to be one thing that we have in early intervention when the child's 2, but helping parents navigate that long term. Like, how might that positioning look as she enters preschool, or this preschool that you want her to go to? So then you're starting to have those conversations. I think that Kaydee and Michele really talked about that advocacy piece today. And that's a piece that sometimes, for me personally, I think I forget to share with parents. Like, think about this long term. Will that look like? Right now, we're just trying to solve the eating issue, but what do we want this positioning to look like long term? So I appreciate that. So share one more thing and then we'll wrap up.
We sort of had 2 and 3 sort of flowed into each other, so I'll sort of address them together perhaps. We had talked about how, again, just coming right out of that parent presentation, it's so important to make them feel heard, to understand that their concerns are valid, but also to really understand what is at the heart of those concerns. So is it that the pediatrician said, no screens before 2? Is it that they're worried about, joint attention and she's just, sucked into a screen? Like, what are the real concerns? Just so we understand them fully, because there are a lot of different things that the parents could be sort of concerned about when it comes to that technology. So understanding the concerns of the parents and then respecting those concerns, remembering that there was a time before screens where we used to do things without technology and they were still effective and we can still make progress. But also weighing that against, the parents having all of the information about, say, language deprivation and how important it is for kids to be able to communicate and express themselves, right? So can we find something that is that low, no tech, maybe something that, we used to use before we kind of became so technology forward, but also sort of weighing that against, here are some of the risks for not giving her the bountiful vocabulary that we could give her with a screen, right? So kind of going through all of that.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything? Group of mine?
Great points. Great suggestions. Just again, for everybody, we do compile those. So anybody who took notes, if they will email either, I'll put my email in here and we will just gather those, and they're on iEcho in our content portion. So you can go down and share those or utilize those as for other families that you're working with to get all those recommendations. We are at time. And so just a reminder that our next session will be July 28th around cultural and linguistic competences with AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, and I've already told her, I'm always going to, Kaylee, pronounce her name wrong because I have somebody else who says it Callie, and then in my brain I go, is it Callie, Kaylee? So look she did it phonetically for me. So thank you, Kaylee. So again, July 28th over Zoom, and thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.